Jared, just wait. We're live in one spot, but now I'm going to get us to go live on Instagram.
Ooh.
It does this. It takes a little. There we go. Now I can go live. It takes a. It's a lag before it'll let me push the button. Now we're live in both places.
Yay. Yay for liveness.
So this is I told you before you came on. I mean, this is a different interview because you and I have just met through LinkedIn, and we have some mutual. We have Wendy in common,
That's right.
and we've traded some voice memos. I just saw Wendy in San Francisco, and
I just saw her this weekend too at my house.
well, you guys are buddies, so you
Yeah.
guys see each other all the time. But I think you and I have some stuff to talk about because you're into social justice, you're into group facilitation, you're into music. I'm not as into. I have a long sordid history with music that I can get into another time. But uh, I just want to learn something from you, and I
Yeah.
want to be in connection, and that's what I'm hoping for. That's it.
Love it.
I want to
I
learn
think
something from you, and I want to be in connection.
I think that's a fair request. I think I can
Yeah.
deliver on that, I hope.
Yeah. So, do you want to introduce yourself? And you've got your hands on lots of things,
Yeah.
and help us locate you and what your hands are into to start
Yeah.
with.
No, sounds good. Jared Carroll, he him pronouns. I live in Oakland, California. Been here 21 years in the Bay Area, or in Oakland, 24 in the Bay Area. I lived in the city for a little bit. Yeah, hands in lots of places. I think the least interesting is like my actual current role. So if we get to that, fine, but it's not really kind of my thing. But what I'm about is, I would say, at the intersection of, as you kind of alluded to, social justice, inclusion, right, community, culture, right. So there's that kind of pillar. Then there's storytelling, right? Like what are the stories that we each tell ourselves, each other? What are the community narratives? Who's telling them? That whole thing, which of course ties into the whole social justice DEI thing. Music, of course. I'm, as you can see, got the guitar. It's convenient to play, but it's also a nice prop to have
You
behind me.
only have one guitar?
No, there's more over here.
I was going to say, I'm like, I bet he has more on those walls.
Um, and the other pillar, well, they're kind of two pillars, but they're I'm realizing increasingly that they're more connected than even I originally thought. Is like kind of Buddhist mindfulness stuff, right? Around less of a spirituality, less of a religious thing, and more of a kind of a philosophy of life,
Hmm.
combined with the EQ stuff, right? Awareness, curiosity, empathy, compassion. And the reason I've started to see those more kind of intermingled lately, like I'd say the last 3 years or so, is that it's about healing, my own healing and our collective healing. And that has become more apparent to me the last couple of years, personally, and as I view just politics and the way people interact with each other, especially in the context of DEI. And I put that in quotes because I think um, I don't know, maybe we'll get into it. I think there's some issues with the DEI industry,
We'll get into
around
it.
how we go about affecting change, driving change, wanting change, and how we are not focusing individually and collectively on our own healing. And I would argue that because of that, many of us are actually colluding with the so-called enemy, or the blockers of the change that we say we want to bring about. So I know I went a bunch of different places there, but I
Mm,
guess that's a good place to start, and you can have your pick of where you want to dive in and go deeper.
mm, mm. So too many places already. Um, I'll just locate myself that
Yeah, please.
I lived in San Francisco for 27 years and I'm now living in Germany. And I've become less liberal. I'm
Mm,
less progressive. I started, I'm just, I'm outing myself. I have started to, I think maybe some of the things that you're talking about, when a movement gets orthodox, I get nervous
mm-hmm,
because I'm
mm-hmm.
like, ooh, this is starting to feel like something other than inclusion anymore. And that's what started to happen inside of me. So I'm kind of at a crossroads right now.
Well, it's interesting how I don't know if I would use the same words that you use around, being less liberal. Because I think my politics and what I believe hasn't really changed much. It's but what has changed, and maybe this is true for you, and maybe this is where our kind of our paths
Why I'm drawn to you.
perhaps is. And Gandhi said it like some quote he had, like, there are many things that I'm willing to die for, but there's nothing I'm willing to kill for. I think maybe not that
Interesting.
extreme, but that idea really resonates with me. And when I heard you say, I've become less liberal, I was like, oh, have I become less liberal? I'm like, no, I don't think I've become less liberal. I've just become more aware of what I and we are willing to do to bring about the liberal change that we want. And I'm not a bomb thrower anymore, and I haven't been for a long time. A friend of mine said, some people are firmly rooted in the bomb throwing stage of their revolution. And so I think for me, it's not about becoming less liberal. It's about how do I still uh, work towards, in my spheres of influence, whatever those may be, towards the change, but not, I don't know if, can we swear on this or yeah, without being an asshole. Right. And I think a lot of people are assholes. And I know that sounds like a judgment. I suppose it is, but it's really more of an observation.
Well, I'll make it easy for you because I can tell you about how I was an asshole to someone this week. I mean, I thought about you coming on, and I'm like, should I talk about this with Jared? And I'm like, I really want to because I think it would be a much juicier conversation if I were
Let's do it.
just
Let's go there.
honest. And I'm really brave about talking about my mistakes
Mm-hmm.
rather than talking about my performance,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, why not use my bravery? But this isn't about race, it's about gender. And I hold the value that if we're going to be doing inclusion work, that we don't throw bombs, meaning I don't lead from shaming
Mm-hmm.
someone
Mm-hmm.
or pointing fingers at them, but moving from a place of grounded inquiry.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I shamed and blamed someone. I did the whole "you're a dude, you dipshit."
Well, and can I just I know you're kind of interviewing me, but I'm curious, like,
Yeah, yeah.
where do you know, or if you don't know, maybe we could go there. Like, where, why did you do that, or what,
Oh,
like, you know, yeah.
I've unpacked it in therapy. I'll tell you, because of my rank difference, because I'm a woman and the person was a man. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I had to get some backup from my ideas about social justice to even feel justified
Mm,
in being bothered, to even feel justified in using my voice. And so I wasn't regulated. I wasn't coming from Buddha mind. I
yeah.
was just coming from righteous mind,
Yeah.
right? Which I always think for me when I'm doing that, it's because it's compensatory. I'm compensating for the voice that I'm not letting myself have.
Wow. So you know what that reminded me? I keep the books that I really, I mean, if you could see beyond here, there's a whole wall of books, but the ones that I really kind of like, oh my gosh, these resonated with me, especially recently. I keep them close because, and one of them is this book, which maybe you're familiar with.
Conflict is not a, we talked about this, I think, when we met, and
We
that's
might
part of
have,
what
yeah.
made me like fall in love with you.
This
Conflict is not abuse for those that are going to listen to this as a podcast
conflict
later.
is not abuse, and I think everything we've been kind of
What
starting to.
can we just, that is just such a great title.
So
Conflict is not abuse.
it's not.
I didn't register it all the way, and now I'm like really taken into my bones. I'm like, it's not.
Well, and I kind of half jokingly, half not say conflict isn't even conflict a lot of the time,
Mm.
right?
Ooh,
So
say
it's this.
more.
Well, and so just I will the subtitle of this book is Overstating Harm, Community Responsibility, and the Duty of Repair. So the more to your request is when we social justice, DEI, changemaker people, we see clearly the problems with the world, systemic, historical oppression, biases, all the things. Like we see them. Like, you know, I'm a white, straight, cis, et cetera, white man. I see them because I've chosen to see them. People, you know, like yourself who do this work, who are aware, you know, all the DEI people, all the social justice people, they see them. That's why they do the work, right? And they realize that there's harm. That we do the work because we see that there's harm. There's individual harm, there's collective harm, there's systemic harm, there's historical harm, there's intergenerational trauma, there's all these things, right? That's why we do the work. And if we bring that woundedness, as my friend Sean Harvey, I don't know if you know Sean Harvey, he does a lot of work with like men's work and compassion, you know, work. If we bring that woundedness to the work, we're just colluding with that harm. And so if we don't do, and we're so aware of the harm that we have, you know, and I'm speaking not even necessarily for myself. I haven't experienced as much harm as, say, I don't know, pick any intersectional marginalized identity person, right? A queer, you know, Black woman, right? So on the lookout for harm because, you know, because it exists, that then we end up, you know, seeing conflict where it isn't, or seeing harm where it actually hasn't happened. And so this book, she goes into all kinds of things, but there's one quote that I love, and it talks about supremacy behavior. It is, or traumatized behavior often mirrors supremacy behavior. So she says, I have observed that, and this is for people following at home, if you want to, you know, at the bottom of 144 onto 145. I have observed that people living in unrecovered trauma often behave in very similar ways to the people who traumatize them. Over and over, I have seen traumatized people refuse to hear or engage information that would alter their self-concepts, even in ways that could bring them more happiness and integrity.
Well, I'm going to go buy this freaking book today. No, I mean, this is in some ways the language that I've used is, well, I also sometimes think that supremacy also comes from trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's some interesting ideas that we uphold systems of oppression as a way to protect ourselves from the unbearable loss of being human and the fact that we die. It's an attempt at immortality.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's trauma underneath this weird supremacy stuff, and you know, I don't know if it's true. I think it's an interesting, weird idea. Maybe that's the naive part of me that wants to believe that deep down we're all good, even when we're assholes. There's a part of me that wants to hold that view of humanity. And I also know that we do really horrible things to each other when we're moving from pain.
Yeah.
And I just have called it all supremacy. When I moved from my own trauma of being disempowered, which was a legacy trauma that I brought into this interaction with a male friend of mine, that was me moving, in my humble opinion, from supremacy behavior. But I wouldn't call it supremacy behavior because I'm the marginalized identity, and I feel justified in getting away with it. And this happens all day long in my couples therapy room.
And what you just described is exactly, I think, I mean, this was a year plus ago that I read this book, so it's not super fresh, but the idea of it is, that's what I observe all the frickin' time.
Mm-hmm.
And so where I've moved, and this is where like the healing part comes in, this is where, so you know what and I'm not as active as I was, and we can explore why, and you know, the kind of evolution of that if we want. I'm not as active just in general, but especially online, as I was 2 years ago, three years ago, et cetera. Is that when I first started doing this work 24 years ago when my father died. So for people who don't know, I think you know, I think I've told you, the reason I do this work, my father was a gay man. He died of AIDS. At the time I was 27, kind of, privileged white boy surfing, parking cars, drinking beer, kind of didn't, and so I was like, wait a sec, I got to change. So I've changed and I've done my work, right? And I've continued to do my work for 2+ decades. And so I moved through that bomb throwing stage, 15 years ago, where it was like, and part of what's helped me get to where I am, not part, I mean, like huge part of it is Buddhism, is mindfulness, is this whole idea of like non-attachment and equanimity, etc. So, where I've got the most shit from other so-called social justice DEI people, is when I speak about issues from that Buddhist place, from a place of compassion, from a place of equanimity, from a place of pause and like presence. See all the stuff, right? That's when I get the most shit from people, which is ironic because that's the whole point of why I center that, is so that I and we can do the work with integrity, with purpose, with meaning. And so I've realized that, and this has been a recent realization, like the last 2 or 3 years, is that actually I'm in the continual ongoing process of healing. And I'm using the modality of mindfulness, of Buddhist thought, of that as my healing kind of space. It's not the only one available, but it's one that a lot of people use. And I'm not saying, oh, if you don't practice mindfulness, if you're not Buddhist, then you suck. That's not what I'm saying at all. But whatever your thing is, have a thing. Because if you don't have a thing, you're just going to be out there throwing bombs and slaying and actually perpetuating harm and seeing conflict when there actually isn't any, or if there is conflict, seeing it as abuse when it's not. And then you're conflating like when there actually is abuse, because there is a lot of abuse. So it's not like there's no abuse. I'm not saying I don't think she's saying there's no abuse. Just like conflict isn't abuse. And so how do we, I don't know if I'm going to pursue this or not, Tracy, but I've been thinking like, I think if I were to get back into coaching, I would coach like DEI, social justice, change maker people on how to heal themselves as they're doing the work. I don't know if I have the energy for that right now, but I'm kind of being drawn in that world. So we'll see. Watch this space in the next, 2, 3, 4 years.
I think it's needed. I just had Sharna Cassell on last night, who's a trauma therapist who trained with Stacey Haynes and generative somatics, which is all about coming so into your body and tending your nervous system to such an acute degree. Different modality, not Buddhism, but using the body to come into a place of equanimity and compassion. So that you're, and as I reflect on it, I just letting it all hang out with you. I don't know why, but I am. As I reflect on it now, I think partly for me, I used to say something to a friend of mine. I said, if you're going to swim in the waters of any kind of justice work, you better love yourself a lot and you better do a lot of trauma work. And I realized that because I'm an expat, which has brought with it its own kind of destabilizing force in my life, my capacity has just been lower to swim in the water much. I'm like, I don't have enough regulation right now to do the same degree of work that I was doing when I was living at home, speaking the same language, being able to go to the doctor without my phone sort of scrappily using Google Translate, having to like figure out how to pass the driving exam. I mean, it's been destabilizing, right, to say the least. And I'm like, my nervous system does not have the same capacity that it did 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, this might sound, I don't know how it's going to sound. Maybe I won't preface it. I think, and I know a lot, and I'm sure you do too, we know a lot of people in doing justice work, doing DEI work, whether they're in-house, heads of DEI, or they're consultants, they're coaches, they're trainers, they're, whatever, they're speakers. There are a lot of people like in my network, personal friends, and like on LinkedIn. And I know a lot of people, especially in the Bay Area. Like every other person you meet is like a social justice, advocate, right? As I've withdrawn a little bit more from that work publicly, I'm wondering how effective it is, how effective individuals and how effective, organizations, how effective the industry is. And, I think we both know, and probably listeners know, that, there's a shit ton of backlash recently the last couple of years, and there's always backlash. So it's not like there's never been backlash, but it's especially severe the last couple of years with, the legislation, especially in the States, right? Of, anti-trans, anti-race, like, all the propaganda around DEI, didn't earn it, and woke, here's where woke goes to die, all this stuff, right? So on one hand, it's like it's not new, but on the other hand, it's deeper and it's more severe and it's more empowered. I think people, whether they're Ron DeSantis or Trump, at that level, or you're just your average kind of, conservative person who doesn't think that any of this work is needed. There's more agency and autonomy. Like, you know what? I'm not for it, and I'm going to tell you about it. And of course, they don't realize that they're causing harm, but this is where the equanimity and the Buddhist practice comes in. It's like, all right, instead of just going like, well, screw you, you're conservative, you don't know what, that's what the knee jerk is. And that's what we as an industry have been doing for as long as industries existed. And we're actually colluding with the same people. So instead of saying like, you know what, you're a jerk, senior executive white man with privilege, you don't know what the harm you've caused. Well, what's that person going to do with all their privilege and power and influence? They're going to say, screw you. And I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I have the power and influence to do it because you don't have what I have. So what if we, instead of took that approach, actually had conversations like we're having right now with people without the underlying motivation to change them?
Mm-hmm.
So that takes more wisdom, that takes more patience, that takes more equanimity, that takes more compassion, takes more curiosity. And people would say, oh, easy for you to say, white man.
But that sounds like that's how you're using your privilege,
Exactly.
is to facilitate that.
And I'm past that, like, oh, I can't be a part of this conversation, because
Yeah,
I'm
you're fearless. I feel it. It's
it's like,
nice.
and so I'm starting to see some people in the DEI social justice space go, oh yeah, I guess 10 years of calling people assholes isn't really working. Now we're facing the backlash. Oh yeah, maybe we should change our approach. I'm starting to see a little bit of that, but I don't know if I'm seeing enough of it yet. Because I think there's this misunderstanding that if you take the approach I was just describing, compassionate, patient, conversational relationship, that you're somehow giving in, or you're passive, or you're not committed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, where's the balance?
Yeah, so I'm just integrating so many conversations I've had this week. And that Simmons brought up yesterday that the person that's patient and
You talked to
compassionate.
Annette Simmons.
Yeah.
I love the story. She wrote the storytelling.
Yeah.
The
Story Factor.
the story. The person with the best story wins, or whatever, like
Yeah.
that.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I
She
love
wrote
that.
five books. She's got
Yeah.
some others too.
Okay. That's awesome.
She was reminding me that, wait, where were we going?
Sorry, I
That
interrupted you.
No, I interrupt all the time, so now I'm taking my own medicine. Uh, I'm supposed to be a listener. I tell people I teach this listening shit because it's really hard for me, and sometimes things that are really hard for people makes them really good trainers of it because they have to study it so
Exactly.
profusely. No, she was just talking about competitive narratives, that we're competing all the time, that's in our DNA. And then I was talking to we had a eight person panel on Monday about power, rank, and privilege and interpersonal dynamics, and I think that there was a diversity of thought there, but I think there were. Oh, I remember what I was going to say about Annette. She was saying that the person that brings compassion to the dialogue is often seen as the person with no power.
Mm-hmm.
But how this connects to the panel on Monday is that actually, if you're bringing compassion to the dialogue, you're probably higher in psychological rank.
Mm-hmm.
So there's social rank, which is where you are in terms of social location and context rank. But there's also psychological rank that says, you might have a more regulated nervous system in this moment. Or you might have more conflict resolution skills, or you might have meditated more, so you can hold a witnessing conscience in the middle of this conversation. So even though you think you're powerless, those folks that are coming with compassion and equanimity have a lot of power. It's just not perceived as powerful if inside of a competitive narrative.
Right. That's brilliant. And I would argue it illustrates the point I've been
Yeah, I'm
making, not
amplifying
only
it
on
really.
this
Yeah.
call, but just in general, the last couple of years, especially, is that, okay, are you trying to win, or are you trying to change people in society so that it's more equitable? Because it seems like you're trying to win in whatever
That's the
context,
competitive narrative.
right? There was, and I can't remember who I learned this from. Uh, there was a phrase that I really like called um, collab collabitition.
Huh.
And it was this idea, like in the kind of consultant world, when whatever there are projects available or consulting, opportunities, and it's like, yeah, we say, hey, Tracy, wouldn't it be great to collaborate? Like, yeah, we should collaborate. And sometimes there are genuine, true equitable, collaborations, but often it's collaboration. It's like, well, I better make sure that I get this opportunity before Tracy gets it.
I got to tell you, this is a very US thing. I experience this
Perhaps,
collaboration
perhaps.
less living here in Europe. I feel a lot more generosity and more pure collaborations that I've ever experienced
Well,
living in the US.
you know why I think
Mm,
is, and I'm not the first person to observe this. This isn't like
mm.
my
Tell
wisdom.
me.
Capitalism.
Oh, yeah. But it's capitalist over here,
No,
too.
I know, but there's a little bit more of a, I don't know how to describe it.
Capitalism run wild.
Like like a little bit more of acceptance of like socialist principles of like community,
Yes.
in Europe,
Yes.
just historically. And I'm not a historian or like an
Yeah.
economist, anything, but just generally. Whereas like, you mentioned, social or socialism in the United States. It's like you're left of Mao, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
but I experienced this myself, like when I wrote my book and I was trying to sell it, when I was doing more consulting and trying to, you have to pitch yourself. You have
Do you
to
want
go
to
out
tell
there.
people what your book is, by the way?
Oh, sure. Yeah. A white man, what is it? A White Guy Confronting Racism. Yeah. It came out, gosh, almost 3 years ago now. What is this book?
Very
But
cool.
I've found, and maybe this is just my personality, because I'm an extrovert. I'm comfortable. I'm a speaker. I'm a musician. I'm comfortable being in front of people and talking. I don't get nervous. So it's not like I don't have that confidence, but I've never really been good at like selling. And so when I decided to kind of get into this entrepreneurial world, I guess 8 years ago, it was exciting because it was like networking and like kind of innovative and creative and like, okay, well, what do I want to do? I can do it and make money. But then I had to like sell people. I had to like, hey, you should buy my coaching package. Oh, hey, you should. And it just never really worked for me. And I think it's because it just seems at odds to capitalism, like making money on, social justice stuff. And, I know it has to be done. Like there are a lot of people doing it and doing it well and stuff. But I think that's where it can cause problems too. If I'm whatever, I'm a coach, I'm a speaker, whatever my modality is, and I'm trying to get business, well, I have to be competitive, because if I'm not gonna earn money, and I'm not gonna feed my family and pay my mortgage, right? So it it it's almost like a conflict of interest, and there's really, that I understand, no way around it. Like if you're going to be a DEI social justice consultant, like you have to be part of capitalism, and capitalism is what creates the systems that we're trying to fight. So it's like this cyclical thing there's no way out of it. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
you're catching me in this thought when I'm in the middle of redoing my website. And I just before I got on the call with you, I left a message for Annette and I said, Annette, I really had an aha yesterday, because she and I we meet where we were in a women's group together, and there was she's been saying this collaborative versus competitive thing, but I really got it that I actually naturally do not enjoy competition. And it really screws with my mental health. But you want to know what I do?
Hmm.
I love selling. I love it
Yeah.
because I have framed it differently than you.
Yeah.
I see selling as serving people, not as competing with others.
Yeah. I could probably use 10 years of coaching on that. And I
But
might
I
get,
used to be in sales and I only would work for companies whose product I thought really did
yeah.
work.
No, totally. I mean, I mean, I'm bringing back memories of coaches who have tried to work with me, and they're probably just frustrated. Like, why he's so smart, he's so, you know, he has such good ideas, he can do the work, but why is he
Yeah,
not?
I won't analyze you. We'll talk about this offline because I can feel my therapist hat going. I'm like, I have some things to offer you here. No, I mean, uh,
Yeah,
this is the well, let's see. We're talking about capitalism, and we're talking about competitive frameworks and how competition fundamentally, I think, disconnects us from ourselves,
yeah,
and competition disconnects us from one another, and the authenticity that is could have been potentiated if we weren't competing with one another.
yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I was a college athlete. I'm not, active in anything. I'm too old. I get hurt too easily now. But I played college lacrosse. I played soccer very competitively into my like 40s. So I appreciate that type of competition in
Yeah.
a sporting event, right? In fact, the reason I don't, my kids are older now. They're 15 and they don't really do sports anymore. But when they were younger, they'd play a little baseball, softball, soccer, and one year my daughter was fourth grade, I think it was, and I got roped into coaching. Like, well, you used to play soccer. They need a coach. Go coach them. I'm like, okay. So I coached this 9-year-old girls team, and it was awful. I hated it. I really did. I'm not ashamed to say it
Because
because it was. I knew from having played soccer at a high level and being competitive at a high
oh,
level that it never was going to happen with 9-year-old rec. This wasn't even like
a league or anything.
it was a league, but it wasn't like there were no tryouts or anything. These were just girls, hey, go out and play soccer, including my own daughter. And I remember saying at one point, I said, hey, girls, the most important thing is not that you win. The most important thing is that you try to win. And I don't know if I still believe that. That was what, 6 years ago now. So I don't know, but the idea was that like the intent, like I don't know if you have kids, or I guess this could apply not just to kids, but when my kids were younger, like we'd play checkers or any game,
Catan. We play Catan every Sunday
right?
still, 14
And
and
then
16-year-olds.
I know if my son, like, for example, if he was losing or he got bored, he would just kind of like, he wouldn't just say I quit, but he would just kind of not really play anymore, and he just kind of make moves that. And I said, dude, you're not respecting the integrity of the game. So why are we even playing this if you're not trying to win?
Yeah.
And so I don't know why I'm emphasizing that and where it goes now into like the competitive landscape of
I like
business.
that neither one of us know in this conversation because we're
Yeah.
riffing and maybe we'll learn something new. I'm the queen of holding paradox, and
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of making capitalism the enemy of everything because
No.
I certainly think it's better than authoritarianism and some of the other things that are going on in the world right now. I think that it does foster a certain kind of innovation. There's something about the scaling aspect. A colleague of mine said the only thing that grows without check is cancer. And so I've really been thinking more about this idea of enough. And if we could balance capitalism with this idea of enough, maybe I just think there's it doesn't have an
Yeah.
equilibrating, is that the word? This
E- e-
equalizing
Yeah.
force on the other side that says you don't scale to the point where you utilize every damn tree on the planet and kill every animal. You innovate to have enough so that there's enough for everybody to eat and there's enough
Yeah.
health care for everybody to live well. But we're not trying to be cancerous to others and the planet.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great analogy. And I think the challenge is that, well, two things. One is scarcity mindset. So I don't know if you've read the book Scarcity, like scarcity versus abundant mindset, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in that book, they kind of use three main areas, like scarcity of money, of time, and I think of like calories. So it's like around food and stuff. But anyway, how does each one of us in our own spheres of influence and communities, whether it's at work, family, neighborhood, social, all the different things, how do we really know what's enough? Like if we go, oh, hey, okay, I'm good, but what if I, you know, and I'm saying I'm not advocating for this. I'm just kind of saying like, this is what
We're
I think
riffing.
people do, right? Like, oh, well, yeah, I think I have enough, but what if I don't? And then what if like tomorrow or next week or next year, if I don't keep at this pace, then will I have enough then? And then will I be screwed or will I be, whatever? So there's that mindset. And then I think there's also so like my current role, I'm kind of managing and improving a sales new hire program. So all these salespeople get hired, and then we build this program and we train them on like the portfolio of the products and the sales methodology and everything. It's okay. It's not a perfectly aligned role, but it's something for now. But last week I was actually in Vegas at this huge sales conference. I've never been in a room as big as this with like 3,000 people, probably 2,800 of them were sales. So all the executives were on stage telling these stories, and there was a new product launch and all the things. And I guess it was kind of cool. I mean, I don't get off on that kind of stuff, but so then one of the stories one of the executives was telling, he says, yeah, and he's telling how they closed this deal, and it was like, and then we got this $12 million deal with this huge client. And then he's talking to a room full of salespeople, right? And almost as an aside, and I don't know if it was a scripted aside or if it truly was an aside, he said, which by the way is a $350,000 commission. So I'm thinking, like, I've never made $350,000 at a time or in a year or on a sale. So and of course, not all sales are that big at this company, but
Well, and that kind of sale might take 2 years to
exactly.
tee up.
But so the motivation for salespeople is like, yeah, like I'm going to close this $12 million deal and get paid $350,000. And so where is the enough in that context?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, 2 years. So, okay, if it took you 2 years and that was your one sale, well, that seems like enough. That's a decent salary, 175 a year, depending on where you live, etc. Right? But then are you trying to,
That's what I did when I was in sales. I would sandbag and try to hold on to, if I knew I had a big deal coming and I'd already made my number for the year, I'm like, well, I'm just going to hold that deal for next year so I don't have to work the rest of the year.
that's what I would do if I was in sales. Like, wait,
I can say it now. No one's going to ever hire me in sales again, but I'm
yeah,
not a salesperson anymore, so it doesn't matter
yeah.
because I had enough and I didn't want to, be sort of
Well,
losing out on time and yeah.
presumably you have other interests and values, family.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, like
Well,
I've
back
said,
then I was single, but yeah.
yeah, well, whatever. But whatever anyone,
I wanted to go surfing and travel
yeah,
and do other
exactly.
things.
So it's like, oh, if I have enough money, I just made all this money, and I can not really work for the next 6 months. Like, heck yeah. I mean, that would if I could feed my kids and pay my mortgage and buy records, on $15 an hour, I would find a job for $15 an hour. Like I'm not motivated by money. I never have been. Even when I started to make a decent money, it's like, oh, this is easier, this is better.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't like, oh, if I work harder, I'll even earn more money. But I think
You're an anomaly.
I'm probably more of an anomaly than the norm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying there's no one else like that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
This is so interesting. Oh, I really like talking to you. I could just
Well,
talk to
thank
you
you.
for a
Yeah.
long time. Because we're both extroverts. We're both really quick, and I think we're a little interested in similar things. I am having a I don't know why I'm being so processy with you today, but I am. I'm like sharing more with you.
Good, good.
I've had a lot of ahas this week just listening to all these other folks that I've had on the live stream. But I had this new awareness about my obsession with money.
Hmm.
It compensates for low self worth.
So you wait. So let me see if I'm
Money in
understanding.
the bank equals personal human value.
And money not in the bank means you have less human value.
Yep. So there can be a wounded relationship with money,
Yeah. Well, I
right?
know they're like money coaches, right? They help people with
Yeah, no, there's a whole school called the trauma of money,
yeah.
and I mean, I think that that's evolved over time. I've been working on myself for a long time, but like I said, I'm really good at learning from my own
Well,
flaws, and I
yeah.
think I bet other people have a lot of varied wounds around
Well,
this money thing.
I don't know if I mean I probably have wounds as we all do, but I think of it. So I'll tell you a story because we talked about telling stories at the top, right? I grew up poor, single mom. I remember being, I don't know, 11, 12, like middle school, something. And my mom, we moved into a new townhouse and it's probably a little bit, probably rent went up from like, 350 to, 425 or something like that. Now that I know, how that world works. But when you're 12, you don't know this. But I remember my mom got this accordion envelope, right? And with all the slots, 15 slots or whatever. And she cut out little tabs and taped them on. And it said like groceries, uh, electric bill, insurance, haircuts. I remember haircuts. I mean, I don't have a lot of hair now, but at the time I had a lot of hair and I need to get a haircut like every 3 weeks, right? And then it was all this. So she'd get her check every, whatever, however, whenever she got paid every week, every other week, and she'd cash it. And it probably was like $600 or something like that. I mean, I don't know the numbers. I could
And
ask
she
her.
put the money in those
And she
pockets.
would cash it and she put the money. And then there was one at the end that said like fun or something. And it was like $20, $50 maybe. And we'd go get ice cream or we'd go to Taco Bell or, I got an allowance. I got like $5 a week allowance. So there must have been an allowance thing, because I'd go down to Tower Records and buy 45s of the top 40. So anyway, so that's what I grew up with. And I knew, especially once I got into middle school, that kids had nicer things, better clothes, nicer bike, et cetera, like all that. So it wasn't like I was clueless, but other than isolated stories and incidents, I never really felt that I needed or wanted that. It was just like, this is because I had tons of independence, which I still value now, 35 years later. Like my mom was working all the time and I just would get home from school and I'd go ride my bike, go to my friend's house, go here, go, and like I just kind of, and I still have that. Like when I was 25, I drove around the country in my truck for 4 months just to explore. This is before GPS. I had a big Rand McNally map. So with money, now that I am, I have a nice house. We have, like a nice job. I have insurance, medical, all the things like, right. It's almost like a trap.
Hmm.
It's like if we
The
don't make,
golden handcuffs, I think they
yeah, if
call
we
it.
don't make X amount of dollars, then my daughter can't do ballet or,
Hmm.
we like, our PG&E bill is skyrocketing. It used to be,
That's
150.
electric bill for those of you
Yeah,
not in the US.
there you go. Yeah. Now it's 450. Like, wow. Okay. So it's like it's like, how could I get back almost to like when I was 12, where we have an accordion envelope
Yeah,
and but you can't, or
yeah.
I can't, at least I can't right now. My kid's in high school, all the things, but I'm always looking for ways to not make more money to afford everything, but to have fewer interests that cost money so I can earn less money and be less
Hmm.
stressed.
Hmm. I can't believe our time has gone by this fast. I want to connect this money conversation back to human connection because
Yeah.
I think that I'm trusting that we wandered here for a reason. And so I'm wanting to, no,
I'm sure.
seriously,
Yeah.
I like to, I always feel like the unconscious is sort of moving we had an intention. There's always an intention when I send people the invite that's exploring human connection is the intention. But I kind of like to see where the unconscious takes us and
Yeah.
then listen to
Yeah.
what it's trying to say. And there's something really interesting that I'm picking up on here for myself as I listen inward and for you, that there's something about competition and there's something about money that gets in the way. And then there's something about inclusion and the way that we're doing inclusion work that all seem to get in the way of our ability to connect.
Hmm. I would agree with that.
And I'm hearing an invitation. I mean, I'm kind of following your thread line, but I'm hearing an invitation of we need to heal
Yeah.
to do any of those things well. And it doesn't matter your modality for healing, whether it's doing Buddhist practice, somatic practice, psychotherapy, hiking. I don't know. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's more practices I've never even heard of, but that taking one's personal healing seriously so that you show up with wise mind
Hmm.
to a conversation around racial inclusion or inclusion of anyone, so that we bring wise mind to the conversation around competition, so that we bring a wise mind to the ways in which we're earning money and spending money. That's what I'm trying to listen to the larger thread line of our conversation, and that's what I'm taking away anyway.
Brilliant. And I think it's a great summary, and I 100% agree. Um, if and when people do not do their own healing, they are colluding with the harm that they say they're trying to eradicate,
Mm.
period. And it'll never change. You might have a small victory here. You might get this legislation passed here. You might get,
But
but
I gotta say, even for the folks that are kind of assholes sometimes in their healing work, I still kind of am stoked that they got on the train. Because there's a lot of people that haven't even gotten on the train. They're just,
no. Well, because
and I'm not shaming them. My
yeah,
mission in life, truly, I think what I'm very good at is taking really scary ideas and making them very approachable. So I don't like to use kryptonite words like white supremacy and racism and privilege. I think that these words are actually turning people off, and they're people that I would like to turn on to the
yeah,
conversation. So I'm trying to figure out. I mean, that's why I listen on the sidewalks. That's
yeah,
why I went and drove into the South and listened to the South. I wanted to meet people that weren't from San Francisco Bay Area that thought just like me.
totally.
I interrupted you though. You got out your book and I got all
Well, I got out of
excited. I'm
second
like,
book
ooh, Jared's got a quote.
in my
We will not cancel us.
and other dreams of transformative justice. Adrienne
Oh,
Marie,
Adrian Marie Brown. Yeah.
she's a genius. I've had tons of page 67. I've had tons of conversations with people. Oh, so she's talking about online, like kind of just cancel culture and shaming and you suck and the policing and all the things, right? Well, actually, I'll start over. I'll start. She says, but lately, as the attacks grow faster and more vicious, I wonder, is this what we're here for? To cultivate a fear-based adherence to reductive common values? What can this lead to in an imperfect world full of sloppy, complex humans? Is it possible we will call each other out until there's no one left beside us? I've had tons of conversations with people who, in these moments of public flaying, avoid stepping up on the side of complexity or curiosity because in the back of our minds is the shared unspoken question, when will y'all come for me? I see that. I've
I've
been,
never heard those words from her. I feel more of a kindred now with her. I've given some of her holding change as a present to several friends, but that's great. That's been the turnoff in a lot of these conversations.
well, it's been, as we start at the top, I'm no less liberal than I was 3, 5, 10, 20 years ago. In fact, I'd probably say I'm more liberal. I'm more progressive. I'm
I
more,
might be more progressive, but like you, I don't throw bombs and I don't perform anymore. So when someone says, "How come you didn't talk about social identity?" I'm like, "Because I live it. I don't perform it, lady.
yeah,
I don't perform it. I don't need to talk about social identity."
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know how to wrap it, but I
Well,
think.
we have a wrapping. We have a ritual, so I'll
Oh,
lead
you
you
do? Okay,
there.
good.
I do. So This is so fun. Wendy said you and I were going to get along really well, and she was right. She's so lucky to live near you too. I'm so jealous. I am going to hand off the mic to you, and you're going to be speaking to the people who have listened on sidewalks, not just to me.
Okay.
So I want you to imagine them. So far, there have been, I don't know, we just had a couple thousand new listeners sign up. So we've got about 10,000 folks that have signed up to do this. And you can offer them words of wisdom, or you can offer them a wish as our parting ritual, whatever your heart compels you to say to them.
I wish that each one of you, wherever you are, including not even on it yet, on your healing journey, continue on it, take it seriously, give it the primary focus of any and all work you do, especially if it's social justice work, if it's so-called DEI work, if it's change work. Because when you do, I'll frame it in the positive, not as the negative consequential language. When you do that, you will see things as they are. You will see more clearly things as they are. You will see more clearly what needs to change, and you will see more clearly how you can be an influence towards that change.
Amazing. Jared, Karol, it's been a delight. For those of you that listen to this on the podcast later, there'll be a whole bunch of show notes, but you can check out DJ Maju, MAJU.com, Maju, to find Jared's work. And then you can check out his book, A White Guy Talking About Race.
A White Guy Confronting Racism.
White Guy Confronting Racism. Sorry, I didn't get that right. I apologize. And this has been really fun for me. So everyone, thank you for listening. And for those that are going to listen to the recording, you're still here with us. Be well, everyone.